I did not intend to make this video. I don't really consider myself a great shooter, and to be honest with you, outside of working in the firearms industry, I don't really feel like I have the credentials to be instructing anybody or teaching anybody anything when it comes to shooting. However, it was my wife that said to me, no, you really need to make a video on this. You really need to share it with people because there's not too many other videos like it that come from this perspective. So just so you know, I'm just like you guys. In the past, I've watched all these different videos on YouTube from all these different pro shooters or military guys, the classes, you know, just showing you how to shoot or how to become a better shooter, how to manage recoil better. I've done all of that. So the one thing that I always realized when it came down to these older techniques is that they didn't really benefit smaller individuals, like a woman or even just a smaller man, somebody who couldn't get as much surface area or grip on the firearm. Basically, it was just all power, 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 drive the gun, drive the gun, drive the gun, aggressive, aggressive, aggressive. Not saying that that won't work. It's just that, like I said, certain individuals won't be able to do that. What I want to show you guys today is how I now manage recoil, how I've trained my wife to manage recoil and a few of my friends, and it always seems to have amazing, almost instantaneous results. So I think there's something to it. So another reason why I really didn't want to make this video is because it does go against a lot of the previous methods that a lot of instructors taught. A lot of the times it seems like, I don't want to be mean, but a lot of the times it does seem like a lot of the information is just regurgitated. And it's just a common way of thinking that this has to be the right way. So I do feel like there might be a few instructors out there or diehards to a certain technique that are just going to lose it when they hear this, or just call me whatever they want to call me. The only thing I beg of you is please don't be insulted. I'm not trying to say that your way is wrong or my way is right, the best way, or even the only way. All I'm going to say is that I've tried a lot of different techniques and this is what worked for me. And my hope is that there might be somebody else out there who had a similar situation to mine and this technique might help them. I will say for me personally, this has been the most efficient and easy way to shoot I have ever come across. Not just because I was the one to figure it out. It just really is efficient. So yeah, just know that this video is just meant to help even one person, somebody out there. If you don't agree, you don't have to get emotional about it. But who knows, just try it out. It might actually turn out to be good for you. By this point, you guys already know how my mind works. I will break down just about anything and put it back together just to figure out how it works. I've always been like that. It doesn't matter if it's a computer, a firearm, a car, apparently the human body. Sometimes you just gotta be brave enough to experiment with things, put things together, see what works, see what doesn't, and then come up with your own formula, something that works really well for you. So bear with me. I know this video is gonna be a little bit longer than usual, so I'll put in chapters so you can actually go down below in the timeline and jump to wherever you wanna jump to. So let's start with a quick overview. Why do we want to have better recoil management? You know what, you can even call it recoil mitigation because that's kind of what you're doing. You can't get rid of recoil, let's make that clear. But depending on your technique, you can mitigate that recoil. Some people can mitigate it to just about nothing. There's a few reasons why we want to have better recoil management. One being faster follow-up shots. Two being just more confidence. You have a lot more confidence, especially if you're using a red dot when it doesn't leave the window. I can't tell you how much more confident of a shooter that makes you. And it also helps with shot placement, knowing that the firearm is going to end up right back at the spot where it was before it recoiled. It's not so we can mag dump as fast as possible. That's not it. We are accountable for every single shot we fire, regardless if you were defending yourself or not. And with this technique, anything south of 10 millimeters, you can control ridiculously easy. It doesn't even make any sense, no matter what your body type. Before we get started, these are some of the controversial points to this method. 1, if we're considering gripping with our finger strength, I don't really grip the gun at all. 2, with my support hand, I don't index first under the trigger guard. 3, majority of my frame, my body, is completely relaxed. And lastly, 4, stance isn't that important. Let me show you what I mean. So there are many different ways to open your front door. You can kick it, you can blow it up, you can use a sledgehammer, or you can use the key. Point is, there are multiple techniques to recoil management, but why not use the most efficient, or at least the most efficient you can find? Now, obviously there are external ways to compensate for recoil. Compensator. Well, no, actually that's muzzle flip. Difference. I guess the same thing for like ported barrels. Anyway, those do help, but those are outside of your biomechanics. What can you do physically with your body to control recoil? Oh, and obviously this is primarily for handguns. Clear. The first thing that we were told in pretty much every recoil management class or video is to get as high up on the grip with your shooting hand as possible. And a lot of what is told is to pull upwards when you do that. I agree with this 100%. Every different method I've ever used, that has been an advantage, not a disadvantage. That is exactly how you want to do that. Now here's what I do slightly different. These two fingers are pulling in a back and upwards motion. This finger, however, barely has any pressure on it. It is isolation. It is something that takes a bit of practice. While that is happening, I am rotating my thumb up and under the beaver tail. We've all seen this motion, how you grip. That is what's happening. Now, as well as the isolation on this finger being loose, my trigger finger is extremely free to do whatever it wants to do. There is no pressure on it whatsoever. When I'm pulling back and up with those two fingers, it's very minimal, barely if anything. This is me gripping the gun hard with all my fingers, or what most people think is gripping the gun with their fingers. Majority of the pressure is up here at the two top fingers. When you do that, you have play down in the bottom. The gun is going to recoil like this. Guess what's the area where you don't want any play? The bottom. Making the mental note to pull, and if you even look at it, you see what just happened. So you want to make sure that you have more pressure down here. To be honest with you, you only need a little pressure down here. That could be your grip. You don't even have to grip the rest of the gun tight. I said that right, and I can see people just going nuts right now. All that extra force that I used to use didn't do crap. If I make a mental note to take the play out, because watch, here's gripping the gun tight as I can, but most of the pressure is right here. Now watch, here is me gripping the gun. I'm gonna let it go, and then I'm just gonna shift over to gripping the gun down here. Did you see the gun just ever so slightly take a dip down? That is the exact little bit of play that you need to take out of that hand. You can grip it hard and not have the right pressure and have that extra play, Although you're gripping it hard, grip it softer and just grip it from the bottom, and that happens. You take out that play. That play is going to add to the recoil if it's there. All you have to do is take that out. When I started doing that and I really understood the importance of your pinky, your ring finger too, but primarily your pinky, not only did I start getting more accurate shots, I guess if you do flinch and you have that play, you miss obviously big. If you do flinch and you don't have play, you're gonna miss smaller. So the accuracy should be there. It makes perfect sense. But not only did that happen, one of the coolest things is that the muzzle flip, when it came back down, instead of doing an extra dip, it started to stop doing that. Just focus on the pinky. Also, the thing to note is when I'm doing that grip, I'm not so much doing this as much as I'm doing this. I'm literally doing a palm push. I don't know what else to call it. I'm not grabbing, I'm doing that, right? So that's what I'm doing. Now what that's going to do is going to put most of the pressure on the back of the gun while not putting any pressure or very little pressure on the sides of the gun. So when I do that, there's literally a gap in here. Like I can put my finger in there, although I'm squeezing tight with these two, because I'm not wrapped around it and gripping it with my fingers, I can put my finger through there. This helps with two things primarily. Like I said, not so much pressure on the side of the gun where you don't really need pressure, to be honest with you. And two, it's going to help with your trigger pull. I noticed this a few years ago with a red dot and dry fire. It doesn't matter your hand size, just try it. Try lining up right here, meaning you're doing the C clamp with the front. I know it feels awkward at first, but instead of going all the way around like that, just try that. Just try it. That's all I'm saying. Just try it. Red dots are beautiful because they don't lie and they give you so much information, more so than even your iron sights. I have a Mantis X and I still use my red dot more than anything to determine what I'm actually doing wrong when shooting or when something is going astray. It gives you so much information, not just when holding the gun and presenting the gun, but when the shot actually breaks. Or right before the shot breaks and you're pulling the trigger, you will see if you're going down to the right, down to the left, you can see all of that. One thing that I did with my wife after discovering this, I said, okay, grab the gun how you normally do, just grab it, everything's touching everything, and pull the trigger as fast as you can. And not pull it to break, you just want to have some kind of pressure on the trigger. Look at your red dot and see what it does. Now you have to pull it fast, because if you pull it slow, obviously you can keep it center. Pull it fast and see what happens. Majority of the right-handed shooters that I show this, immediately you see that they're pulling down into the left, and they wonder why your shots go down into the left. It's not always necessarily a flinch, it's literally how you could be holding the gun. How you hold the gun can determine your trigger pull, especially when rapid firing. Now to the troublemaker, what everybody has issues with, your support hand. Now what I'm about to show you with this hand is what literally had the biggest impact and changed my shooting the most. It just changed everything. Same thing for everybody I've shown. It literally changed everything. And I'll explain why. We're taught to index, right? That's what most instructors will tell you. For good reason, you know, all that good space right there, you want to get your palm on, right? So we do one of these and then we are there. This always gave me the most problems and it was confusing, and I'll tell you why. What? There isn't that much space back there when you think about it. When I do the index and I rotate upwards, I always felt like my hands were more on my fingers than on the back. Like I could feel a little bit of the back, but if we're talking about like surface area and friction, The other thing is whenever I did that, it made my fingers misaligned. Now let me show you what I mean. All right, so I'm gripping the gun with this hand. When I index and then I rotate up with this hand, I usually get high, but look how much further my thumb is than my index finger. Now you might be like, okay, bring it down, bring it back. But when I do that, I don't feel like it's just not sitting right. Again, it's sitting on my fingers more than it is the back. I didn't think this was a big deal for the longest, but it ended up being a huge deal for me when I tested it out. Now I'm sure there are hundreds of people that can shoot like this quite fine. I am not one of them. There's a few things that happen when you have this grip initially. So let's agree that when we grip the gun, this hand can only ever go so high up on the frame. Right here. Now if I index and I come up higher with this hand, this is where this palm is at, versus down here where this finger is at. You might be like, well, that's not important, so what? You're having the gun on this side. Well, if we do the vice method, where we flare our elbows out like people want, if you were just to let go, look what the gun does. That's the kind of pressure that you're putting on the gun. It's unequal. So that's why I figured out balance was important. Every time I would shoot with this palm being higher, the gun, when I slowed it down in slow motion, I would see the gun recoiling like that, upwards and to the right. So what I realized is that this method for me, I'm having issues placing my support hand where it needs to be. And it was obvious because the gun was dang near flying out of my hand every time I shot it. I knew something was wrong. So what I do now, instead of indexing with my support hand, is so basic and so obvious, it's almost scary. So like I told you, I hold the gun in my shooting hand. I have all this space right here. I take my palm and I put my palm there first. The exact height it's supposed to be and the exact place it's supposed to be on the back of the gun, where there's going to be no gap here. Then put my fingers around. Everybody knows this little hook trick with your top of your knuckle right here. A lot of people do it on the first one, but if you do it on the first one, it kind of has to go in the guard, and there's not that much space in most guns. So the second one allows you to keep it straight, and it hooks right there where it doesn't really bother anything, and you can actually still get in there pretty easily. So that acts as the hold for the leverage. But there, you wrap it around, and then you extend. So this pretty much fixed everything. the forward and back alignment of my thumb on my support hand and my pointer finger on my shooting hand. And not only that, but since I was putting my palm first on all of the grip on the back of the gun, it aligned perfectly. Whereas even if I did want to torque like that, it would be balanced. So here you can see if I were to put my finger back here, obviously I wouldn't do this, but just so you guys can see, I place my palm first. That's where it happens. Notice it doesn't come off the gun when I push out. I still have the leverage point right here. It doesn't come off the gun, and that's how I keep it. One of the biggest issues that I've always had is when people say to crank up for the vise. Well, if you crank up for the vise, you're taking your palm off that supposed important part that everybody says we're supposed to have friction on. So if I'm vicing my elbows out, I lose that. Even if it's just a little bit, I lose a little bit. So is only the top part of the vise important, you know, up here? So I don't do that. So I vice the gun like this instead of this. So my elbows are out, but they're just not as flared as people that want to vice at the top. Now this allows me to keep all of my palm on the surface area of the back of that gun. So this is what it looks like. And then we're pushing out. Nope, it's completely, my support hand is completely on the grip, and my finger and my thumb are both perfectly balanced here in length, as well as it's on the same exact plane. So if I did vice, it would be perfect. So it eliminates left to right movement. And I don't push hard. Like I said, I'm not gripping. The only grip is coming from here. All of this is literally leverage and just proper placement and balance of my two hands. Ever since I started doing this, as far as recoil or muzzle flip is concerned, it's been tracking perfectly center, perfectly upwards. That mixed with your pinky and ring finger stop the extra dip. Also, something that you isolating and thinking about your pinky pressure does is it helps lock your wrist. You just doing that is a motion that really locks your wrist. You can think about it and make it even better, but naturally when you do that with your pinky and you focus on using your pinky as your main form of pressure against the gun, your wrist usually stiffens out and locks pretty well. So yeah, like I said, that support hand technique with that shooting hand technique equals just magic. I just wanted to make note of one thing that I see a lot with the support hand thumb is a lot of people gas pedaling and pushing downwards with their support hand thumb. And I agree with that 100%. If you want to do that, go ahead. If you need to do that, absolutely 100%. I can't see anything wrong with that. It doesn't make sense that there would be anything wrong with that. What I don't understand is when people use that support hand thumb to push inwards. And the reason why they do it usually is that they say they're compensating for a bad trigger pull. If you have a bad trigger pull, work on your trigger pull. Right now, it's kind of like you're just putting a band-aid fix on a problem. So I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that. And here's the thing. I know that there are people that shoot like that better than me. So again, if that's something you do, go ahead. But I think for me, that just adds to the inefficiency again. The way that I showed you the C-clamp with the trigger, it automatically just gives you a straight up and down trigger pull. So me introducing this would just throw everything off all again, the balance that I worked so hard for. I know this may seem like a lot, but I guarantee you it's all quick, it's all easy. I'm just trying to explain it in excruciating detail. But next, after you have your hands, moving on to your elbows and your shoulders, and why I feel like recoil stops there in this technique, rather than what a lot of people say, travel to your body, through your legs into the ground. So your stance is somewhat important. If you haven't realized, all this is kind of like isolation, learning how to use certain things independently. When I have a stiff wrist and a perfectly balanced grip, the next step for me is not to stiffen my elbows, specifically not to stiffen my elbows or my shoulders. Here's the thing, how with like modern grips right now, we're opposed to locking out. So one thing about locking out, and I have tried, the lockout method just to see, is when I did it, I was inherently more accurate. The reason why I would figure is because there's less playing parts. You know, you can't get the balance of, you know, how much extension to put on this elbow versus that elbow versus all of that stuff, you know. And as far as your grip, it's all straight and it's aligned. So when you shoot like that as a beginner, you tend to, and I see this a lot, you tend to shoot better. Now, we all know why we don't want to do that, because you do that and then you go turtle, and then you have like no peripheral over your arms, or very little at least. And also you're locking out. So what does that do? That's going to cause the recoil to just go straight down your arms, straight to your shoulders, rocks all of this up here, and then it's going to also have to dissipate through your legs. That's the only place for it to go. So when you see people shoot turtle, what do they often do? They lean forward into it real heavy because they have to. 9mm recoil is, I don't want to say it's a joke. It's because I remember not being able to control it well. 9mm recoil is soft. It's very, very soft. When you stiffen out, you make that soft recoil that much more of a heavy pulse that you have to, you know, if anything, you're enhancing it. So my question to you is, how much different is you locking out like this versus you locking out like this and keeping all of this stiff? We like to talk about suspension. This isn't suspension. You locking out your muscles as tight as they can is close to what you would do if you were locking out your bones. A 9mm can't make this suspension happen if you're completely locked out. It's not strong enough. 9mm is literally like a 3-year-old child hitting your hand. Like, that's it. If you stiffen your hand and have a 3-year-old child hit your hand though, you're going to rock. But if you put out your hand and relax your elbow and your shoulder, but keep your wrist stiff, you will absorb all of that recoil before it even gets a chance to go down to your body, to your legs. That's what I realized. So I don't lock out my elbows or shoulders, and I actually keep them very loose. My grip is balanced, my wrist is locked. Lock your wrist. You know, pull that pinky back and lock your wrist. But isolation, meaning that, yes, those are locked, but everything else is very, very fluid. Everything else is very relaxed up here. You can know if somebody is doing it right by their head a lot of times, because if you're too tight, all of this is going to enhance it and you're going to see your head jerking back and forward with every shot you take. I still make this mistake. You know, after I shoot a couple hundred rounds, I start, it's just like, oh crap, you know, I can tell. And I have to tell myself, lock your wrist, relax your elbows, relax your shoulders, and then everything falls back into place again. So now that we have a balanced grip in our hands, our wrists are locked, our elbows and our shoulders are pretty much loose and relaxed. The only thing that's left is your stance. And I'm going to be honest with you, if you do those first parts correctly, like I said in the overview, your stance isn't that important, at least for handgun calibers. It just isn't. Handgun calibers, mine is obviously like 44 Magnum and up. Of course, you want to get a better stance for those. But anything less than that, you can more or less control it on one leg like a flamingo, or even sitting in a chair. It shouldn't really be an issue. There's no real need to transfer recoil down to the ground and through your legs, because 90% of it, I feel like, will get absorbed right here. And I know that was detailed, but that's it. That's literally how I mitigate my recoil as much as possible. Again, why not? So from a C-clamp, it's pull, lock, palm, balance, relax, relax, shoot, recoil mitigation. You see how much easier that is when I'm not trying to go into detail? But yeah, that's it. Some things you gain from this way of shooting is that eventually you'll get to the point where if you're using a red dot, it won't leave the window. And that is a confidence booster. Allows you to want to shoot faster. It allows you to shoot faster. Like I said, the red dots give you so much information. You'll also notice the red dots start tracking perfectly center, like just up. Which is beautiful, instead of like up to the right or up to the left. So that's all good too. Another benefit is I shot close to 1,000 rounds like this the other day, and dang near zero fatigue to my hands or my shoulders or elbow, just my arms in general, no fatigue. If anything, most of the fatigue was in my legs just from walking around the range. But yeah, within 5 hours, we shot about 1,000 rounds and no problems. Whereas before, my hands would have been tore up and raw, and yeah, So the other benefit is that you'll get little to no muzzle flip eventually. You'll get to that point once you really start to understand the pressures. The benefit to that is confidence. Not only do you get that though, but once you really start to understand the pinky pressure, when the gun comes back from its recoil and a little bit of muzzle flip, it won't dip that hard, which is amazing. So that allows you to get back on target even faster. There is literally no fighting the gun. It's just riding a wave. This is the point right now where I can tell when somebody is fighting a gun rather than just flowing with it. The craziest part about this whole technique is people mistakenly do it all the time. Have you ever been shooting and then you're trying to manage your recoil, or you are managing your recoil, but then you get that one shot that just breaks really soft and you're like, was that a bad load? Like, what's going on? Did it even fire? And that is you relaxing and doing everything else right. It's like the universe is just aligned and you had that moment and you're thinking it's a mistake when really that's what I'm trying to show you. You want to make that repeatable. So that soft shot is just, that's what you want. I have in the past few years seen a few really big name, shooters saying somewhat similar things to this, that they don't necessarily try to fight the gun as much. They just let it do what it's supposed to do. And that's kind of this whole method. That's kind of what it is, And when I do see the guys that are trying really hard, but happen to be shooting with like low recoil, you can see that they fatigue so fast. And it's just like, oh man, not the best use of the pressures and the balance of the firearm to make it just flow. So yeah, that's it. I know this was long. I hope it helped you though. Like I said, I'm going to put in chapters. You guys can jump to wherever you want to. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to leave a comment below, or you guys can find my email on my YouTube profile, or my Instagram is always a good one to leave a message on. Don't forget to like this video. I did have to write a bunch of notes for it. And yeah, that's all I got for you. You guys take care of yourself, and I'll see you guys again in the